Hi guys! Boy, do I have a delicious recipe for you today. This is one of our all-time favorites. I don't think I've ever served it for anyone that they didn't ask for the recipe, and it's about as simple as you can get. Delicious and simple, what more could you ask for? This is biscuits and gravy. And not only am I going to show you how to make the gravy, but I am now starting to put this in biscuit cups. I'll show you all about that, but I'm excited about it because this is our Christmas morning meal always when the kids come over. And usually I get up early and I start everything. And you're tending to the stove and tending to the oven, but this way I can make these ahead of time. I individually wrap them, put them in the freezer, and then I can pull them out whenever I want and just reheat them in either the, what do you call that thing, air fryer or in the oven. So I can't wait for you to see these and love them the way I do. I made these one time for two writer friends who came over for a writers conference. This was many years back. They were both from Eastern Canada. And when I told them we were having biscuits and gravy, they gave me a blank stare because they had never heard of biscuits and gravy. I didn't know that was possible. But they loved them and asked for the recipe. And I can only hope that biscuits and gravy are slowly making their way across the provinces as we speak. So let's get started. I was going to say let's go to the kitchen, but we're actually in the kitchen. I'm in my apothecary, obviously, but I have to shoot out here because I can leave the lights up all the time. It was just a pain having them in the house and having to move them around whenever we wanted to do anything. So now they stay where they are, and I make 14 trips from the little cottage out to my apothecary, dragging all the food out here. So clearly that was a smart decision and a time saver, right? So as I mentioned in the other video where I was making turkey gravy, a roux is the basis for all sorts of things. All cream of soup mixes can start out as a roux or do start out as a roux. Of course, gravy and Alfredo sauce. If you have just some butter and flour, chicken stock, garlic, and Parmesan, the good kind of Parmesan, I mean, you can make a pretty decent Alfredo sauce out of that. Well, oddly enough, this also starts out, it doesn't start with the roux, but the roux is the basis of the gravy for this. But the difference is we already have the meat in here and we're not just looking at the fat. I think I have about a pound of Jimmy Dean sausage in here. I'm going to cook it just until all the pink is out. And we can't measure the fat in this. It would be impossible to do so. So this is where I guess we can call it intuitive cooking comes in, because you're just learning how to recognize when food is ready. And then you're never at a loss. It doesn't matter what you have. It doesn't matter if you have 3/4 of a pound of sausage or a pound and a half. You know what you're looking for. So I just really believe that's the best way to learn how to cook. So we'll just look at this together and I'll show you what I'm seeing. So far, there is a lot of fat in here, and part of that is because I did start out with about a tablespoon of butter. I did that because I never really, it sounds so weird to say, but I never really have enough fat in the sausage to make as much gravy as I want to. So, my motto, everything's better with butter. And so I did add a little bit of that in there. And I might add a little more as we go along. So this is getting close. There's still a little bit of pink. The only other ingredients you're going to need are flour and milk. And then optionally, but not to me, I would always do it, I put a little freshly grated nutmeg over it. I know it sounds weird, but it is the ingredient that makes you kind of sit up when you're eating it. And then I learned this one from my friend Kathy. Sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't. I taste the sausage to see how it is because every batch is a little different, I think. But we were camping with our friends Jay and Kathy. We were, what were we doing? Those out at the dunes riding AVMs, ATVs. What do you call those things? Obviously, I didn't make it a habit after that. It was a lot of fun, but I made biscuits and gravy, and she told me that she always put Worcestershire sauce in it. And I didn't think it needed it that batch, but I have since had batches where the gravy, like if I bought an off-brand, don't do that. The sausage just is lacking something, and so then I'll put a little splash of it in there. So I might put a splash in here just to show you how much I'm talking about. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now, when you're making a gravy, remember it's generally equal parts of flour and a fat. And since we have no idea how much fat is in here, that's where we may end up adding a little more butter. But what I'm going to do, that might look like a lot, but I bet if we had a way to squeeze out all this sausage and look at the fat, we'd find there was quite a bit in there, even though it doesn't look like it. And we're just going to stir until that gets incorporated in. We don't want it to be super dry, but we want it to, the flour to soak up all of the fat. And I still see that I have room for more because I've got some sizzling going on over here. I don't want to go crazy, but the more of the roux portion you have, the fat and the flour, the more gravy you can make. So if you have a bunch of people coming, now see what's happening here is I have to scrape it up off the bottom, but that's not a problem because when we put the milk in, you're going to see that that will take care of that. But if you have a big crowd of people, you could stretch your sausage by having more of the flour and fat so you can have more of the milk. I will say I never, ever, ever order biscuits and gravy when I'm out at a restaurant. Reason being because it's like they put this much of the sausage in and the rest is gravy, and I think, well, where's the meat? So I just want to soak that up a little bit. So when I made the gravy in the previous video, I said you want to cook that flour and butter for about 10 minutes, but you can't do that with this because the sausage would just get too hard. So you just kind of have to forfeit that, but it never lacks in flavor. I think the problem with the gravy is there's no, umami to carry the day. Like the sausage has so much umami in it, that just intense flavor that you don't notice that the flour didn't cook for 10 minutes. So you can get away with it with this one. Okay, so in that previous video, as I was mentioning, what a roux is dying for is liquid. It just wants to soak up liquid. And so I apologize ahead of time for the fog that's going to come over. Actually, you might be seeing a lot of that already. Sorry about that. So I'm just going to take some milk, and you'll be able to hear right away that the roux is delighted. It just wants that liquid. And here's where I love this little doodad, and I can scrape the bottom with it as I go. I'm going to add more. And you're just going to keep adding it until it has made enough gravy. Again, you don't want it too thick and you don't want it too thin, and only you can decide that. But after you've made this a ton of times, you're going to know instinctively when it's ready. We have this, like I said, every Christmas morning. This is what we have. And my sister wanted to know how to make it, so I sent her the recipe. She made it. Her husband loved it. And because he hunts every year with a bunch of guys, that's now what he requests. And so she makes a gigantic crock pot full of this and sends it off with them, and they love it. So this is looking good, but I already know that the milk is going to thicken up, so I'm going to need to add a little bit more. I'm going to do that now because it'll help for the flavors to kind of go through the whole gravy while it's evaporating a little bit. So here's where we're going to take, I hope you have one of these. This is like one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. I'll link to it below. It's just a little multi-plane. And of course, nutmeg. And nutmeg is the more agile of the nuts, the tree nuts. And so watch, because it does have a tendency to jump right off your microplane and try to swim. So gotta watch that. Not too much more than that. I didn't really hardly took any off of that at all. Maybe a tiny bit more because I do love it. Okay, so we're going to do that. And then if you need it, like I haven't tested this yet. Let me see. I love these little spoons. I always keep several of these with me when I'm cooking so I can have a fresh spoon to taste, because I think everybody that is eating this after you is grateful when you do that. But I'll try it first. I don't think it's going to need this at Worcestershire, but a couple splashes aren't going to hurt it either. So I'll do it so you can see. That's very good already. But I would just do maybe a tiny little dash, hardly any at all, but it's kind of nice to have layers of flavor in there. Okay, and I do want to add pepper. I think gravy needs pepper. Doesn't need a lot of salt. And we're going to put this over biscuits, and I find that biscuits are salty enough as they are, so I'm not even going to put any in right now. I'll try it again in a little bit. But here is where it's up to you how thin or how thick you want it to be. If you want it thinner, you just add a little more milk. And if you want it thicker, then you just cook it down. It will thicken as it sits. So this is the gravy portion, but I'm going to show you now how I have started making these little biscuit cups, sausage and gravy biscuit cups that I can then freeze. And I love it because that frees me up. So this Christmas will be the first year that I will be doing that. And it's going to be so nice in the morning to just get up and put those little cups in a baking pan and put it on low in the oven with some foil over it. And by the time the kids come over to open presents, it will be nice and hot, and I will hardly have had to do a thing. Okay, I'll show you that next up because this looks done to me. I forgot to add that this is a good time to add just a little butter, maybe another little one. Clearly, you have not stumbled upon the healthy eating channel, but it is delicious. Okay, all right. I'm going to let this sit while I get the biscuits ready. So what we're going to do is open up. You can make homemade biscuits, of course. Everybody would love that if you would. But these are for those days when making the biscuits, or excuse me, making the gravy part is all you have time to do. So I'm just going to open these up. And I've already made another batch earlier today. I love these Pampered Chef stoneware pans so much because really you just have to kind of wipe it out, which is what I did earlier. So you're just going to take each of these and split them into two. And then you're going to take these, put them in the little cups. Got a little leaning tower of biscuits there. Come on. Now you're just going to pop this into a 350 oven. I am using a little tiny oven because we have downsized from our house into a little tiny cottage with a little teeny tiny oven. And it just takes longer. Everything takes a little longer. So I'm going to cook these about 15 or 16 minutes, but check yours after 12 minutes. And what you're looking for is you want to make sure that the sides are nice and golden brown